Hi everyone, this is example 1 from chapter 15 in our student packet. So before I start this example, I just want to give a rundown of this chapter. So chapter 15 is our introduction to hypothesis testing. And in chapter 15, we're going to learn two types of hypothesis tests, a one proportion z test and a one sample t test. Both of these types of tests will compare a sample against an already established population parameter. So when we do hypothesis tests, we first establish the hypotheses. And from those hypotheses, we then run the test and compare our results against these hypotheses. So in example 1 here, we're just going to practice writing hypotheses. And every example here is with regards to proportions. So these are all going to work with P. So when we write hypotheses tests, we have a null hypothesis and an alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis we write as H sub 0, and the alternative hypothesis we write as H sub A. So let's look at part A here. It says, in the 1950s, only about 40% of high school graduates went on to college. Has the percentage changed? So we would imagine that this 40% is already established, and we're taking a sample and seeing that if the proportion has changed. So the null hypothesis is always that nothing has changed. So in this case, it would be that the population proportion continues to be 40% or 0.4. The alternative hypothesis is the hypothesis that something has changed. And in this case, we don't know what that change is. The question is not asking if it's gotten bigger or smaller, just if it's different. And so our general way of saying if something is different is saying that P would not equal 0.4. For part B, it says 20% of cars of a certain model have needed costly transmission work after being driven between 50,000 and 100,000 miles. The manufacturer hopes that a redesign of the transmission has solved this problem. So, again, we're looking at a proportion. The null hypothesis is that nothing has changed, meaning the redesign did not actually solve any kind of problem, and that the proportion is still 20%. The alternative hypothesis would support that something has changed. In this case, they want to know if they've solved the problem, meaning that there is less costly transmission work, meaning that the proportion of vehicles that need this costly transmission work is less than 20%. And then finally in part C, it says the drug Lipitor is meant to lower cholesterol. Is there evidence to support the claim that over 1.9% of users experience flu-like symptoms as a side effect? So in this case, the claim that they're making, they want to see if a sample supports a change in that over 1.9% of users experience flu-like symptoms. So I'm actually going to write the alternative hypothesis first, and this would be that the proportion is greater than 1.9% or 0.019. Now the null hypothesis, some people write as an opposite, but it's better to, in our text, we always use an equal sign here. So even though the null would actually be that it would be less than or equal to 0.19. We don't include the less than in our null hypothesis, and it's just something with this text. There are other textbooks that would use a less than or equal to here.